There are moments in life that define who we truly are. Not the moments of glory or success, not the times when everyone is watching and applauding. No. The moments that reveal our real character are the silent ones, the moments when nobody is looking, when no camera is recording, when no reward awaits us. Those are the moments that expose the true essence of a person, and this is the story of a man who discovered his own humanity through the eyes of a child that the world had forgotten. The weight of silence. Joseph Marcus was a 42-year-old man carrying the weight of 2 lives on his shoulders. His face, marked by the deep wrinkles of exhaustion, told stories that his words could never fully express. He had lost his wife, Sarah, 5 years ago. A car accident on Interstate 95 near Jacksonville, Florida, that took away not just the woman he loved, but also the financial security she provided as a nurse at Wolfson Children's Hospital. Since then, Joseph worked temporary jobs. He cleaned office buildings at night in downtown Jacksonville. He carried boxes in warehouses during the day. He mopped floors in shopping malls on weekends. Every job was temporary. Every paycheck was small. Every day felt like climbing a mountain that never reached its peak. But Joseph wasn't alone in this struggle. He had his son, Carl, 8 years old, bright eyes that sparkled with curiosity and intelligence, a smile that could light up the darkest room. But Carl couldn't speak, he couldn't hear. Carl was deaf and used a wheelchair. He had cerebral palsy, a condition that had confined him to that chair since birth. The world looked at Carl and saw limitations. Joseph looked at his son and saw infinite possibilities. Every morning, Joseph would wake up at 5 o'clock. He would help Carl get dressed, brush his teeth, and prepare for school. He would pack Carl's lunch with love, always including a little note written in simple words and drawings that Carl could understand. Then he would push that wheelchair to the bus stop, kiss his son on the forehead, and watch as the special education bus took Carl away to Riverside Elementary School. Joseph worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. His hands were always dirty. His back always ached. His clothes were worn and faded. But his love for Carl was immeasurable. It was the only currency that mattered in their small apartment on the west side of Jacksonville, in a neighborhood where most people were struggling just like him. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people. The walls were thin, and you could hear the neighbors arguing through them. The heating didn't work properly in winter, and the air conditioning barely functioned in summer. But it was home. It was where Joseph and Carl built their life together. Carl attended a special school during the day. He had teachers who knew sign language. He had therapists who helped him with his mobility. He had friends who understood him. But at home, it was just Joseph and Carl, father and son, 2 souls connected by love so deep that words, even if Carl could speak them, would never be enough to describe it. Joseph had dreams. Not big dreams, not dreams of becoming rich or famous. His dreams were simple. He dreamed of being able to afford better medical care for Carl. He dreamed of moving to a safer neighborhood. He dreamed of giving his son a future where he wouldn't be invisible, where people would see Carl for who he really was, a brilliant, kind, loving child with so much to offer the world. But dreams cost money, and money was something Joseph didn't have. The interview. It was a Tuesday morning in June when Joseph saw the job posting. A cleaning position at Meridian Realty Group, one of the most prestigious real estate firms in Jacksonville. Located in a gleaming glass building in the San Marco neighborhood, Meridian Realty was where the wealthy bought and sold their properties, where million-dollar deals were made over coffee in marble-floored lobbies. The pay was better than anything Joseph had seen before. $35,000 a year, with benefits, with health insurance, with stability. Joseph's hands trembled as he filled out the application. He had never worked at a place like this. He had never even been inside a building like this. But he had to try. For Carl. He always did everything for Carl. 3 days later, he received a call. An interview. Thursday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Joseph borrowed a shirt from his neighbor. He pressed it carefully with an old iron that barely worked. He polished his shoes with newspaper and water because he couldn't afford shoe polish. He looked at himself in the mirror and tried to see what the interviewer would see. He saw a tired man, a poor man, a man who had failed to provide better for his son. But he also saw a fighter, a man who never gave up, a man who loved his child more than life itself. The Meridian Realty building was intimidating. 30 stories of glass and steel reaching toward the Florida sky. The lobby was cold and sterile, with marble floors so polished you could see your reflection in them. The receptionist barely looked at Joseph as he approached. She was young, beautiful, and clearly accustomed to dealing with important people. Joseph was not important. "I'm here for an interview," Joseph said quietly. 2 o'clock. With Mr. Harrison. The receptionist checked her computer without making eye contact. 15th floor, take the elevator on the left. The elevator ride felt eternal. Joseph watched the numbers climb. 13, 14, 15. His heart was pounding. This was his chance. This was the opportunity that could change everything for him and Carl. The 15th floor was the executive level. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Jacksonville. The Atlantic Ocean sparkled in the distance. The office was decorated with modern art and expensive furniture. Everything screamed success and wealth. Mr. Richard Harrison was the office manager. He was a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit. He shook Joseph's hand with a firm grip and looked him directly in the eyes. Joseph appreciated that. Most people didn't look him in the eyes. The interview lasted 20 minutes. Joseph answered questions about his experience, his reliability, his work ethic. He told Mr. Harrison about his 5 years of cleaning experience. He didn't mention Carl. He didn't mention his struggles. He simply presented himself as a hard-working man who needed a job. "You'll start Monday," Mr. Harrison said at the end. 6 in the morning. You'll clean the building before the staff arrives. You'll maintain the bathrooms, the common areas, and the hallways. You'll report directly to me. Do you have any questions?" Joseph's eyes filled with tears, but he held them back. "No, sir, thank you, sir. I won't let you down." As Joseph left the building, he felt lighter than he had in years. He had a job, a real job, with benefits, with stability. He could give Carl a better life now. He could finally breathe. He didn't know that his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The invisible child. George Whitmore was one of the most powerful men in Jacksonville. He owned Meridian Realty Group. He owned 3 other real estate companies. He owned shopping centers, office buildings, and residential developments across Florida. He was a billionaire, a self-made man who had built his empire from nothing. George had everything money could buy: a penthouse apartment overlooking the river, a yacht docked at the marina, a collection of luxury cars, homes in Miami, Tampa, and Clearwater. He had power, influence, and respect in the business community. But George had one thing he couldn't buy with all his money. He had a son who didn't want to spend time with him. Donald Whitmore was 12 years old. He was intelligent, athletic, and handsome. He had everything a child could want: the best schools, the best clothes, the best toys. But he was lonely. His mother, George's ex-wife, had custody of Donald during the school year. She lived in Atlanta with her new husband. Donald only saw his father during summer vacation and occasional weekends. This summer, Donald was spending 6 weeks with George. 6 weeks that George had planned to be special. He had arranged for Donald to attend an exclusive summer camp. He had planned trips to theme parks and beaches. He had wanted to show his son how much he loved him. But Donald didn't want to go to camp. He didn't want to go to theme parks. He wanted to spend time with his father, real time, not the rushed, scheduled time that George could spare between business meetings. So George had allowed Donald to come to the office during the day. It was supposed to be a compromise. Donald could see what his father did. He could understand the business. Maybe they could bond over it. But the office was not a place for a 12-year-old boy. The staff was busy with their work. They had no time for a child. George was in meetings most of the day. He would see Donald in the morning, tell him to stay in the break room and watch television, and then disappear into his office for hours. Donald sat in that break room alone, watching television that he didn't care about. He watched the other employees come and go. They would glance at him, maybe smile politely, but nobody really saw him. Nobody really cared. He was just the boss's kid. An inconvenience, an interruption. By the end of the first week, Donald had stopped trying to engage with anyone. He would arrive at the office in the morning, go straight to the break room, and sit in silence. He would draw pictures. He would read books. He would stare out the window at the city below. He was invisible. And invisibility, he was learning, was a very lonely place to be. The moment, everything changed. It was Joseph's third day working at Meridian Realty. He arrived at 6 in the morning, as always, with his cleaning supplies and his quiet determination. The building was empty at that hour, just the security guard at the front desk and Joseph, moving through the hallways with his mop and bucket. By 8 o'clock, the staff started arriving. Joseph would step aside, make himself small, try not to be in anyone's way. He was invisible too, just the janitor, the man who cleaned up after everyone else. It was around 9 o'clock when Joseph first saw Donald. The boy was sitting in the break room alone, drawing something on a piece of paper. He was a handsome kid, well-dressed, with expensive sneakers and a designer shirt. But there was something sad about him, something lonely. Joseph recognized that sadness because he saw it in Carl's eyes sometimes when Carl felt left out or misunderstood. Joseph was cleaning the break room when Donald looked up and made eye contact with him. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Donald looked back down at his drawing. Joseph continued his work, but he couldn't stop thinking about the boy. There was something about him that reminded Joseph of Carl. Not physically. Donald could hear and speak and walk, but there was that same sense of isolation, that same feeling of being alone in a room full of people. The next day, Joseph saw Donald again. Same spot, same lonely expression. This time, Joseph decided to do something different. He finished cleaning the break room and then sat down at the table across from Donald. He didn't say anything. He just sat there, quietly, respecting the boy's space. Donald looked up, surprised. Adults didn't usually sit down and just be with him. They were always busy, always rushing. Always somewhere else. "What are you drawing?" Joseph asked gently. Donald showed him the picture. It was a drawing of a house. A big house with a pool and a garden. There were stick figures in the drawing, a man and a boy holding hands. "That's beautiful," Joseph said. "Is that your house?" Donald shook his head. He pointed to the man figure. Then he pointed toward George's office. Joseph understood. The boy was drawing a picture of what he wanted, a house where he and his father could be together, a place where they could just be a family. "Your dad is a busy man," Joseph said, "but I bet he loves you very much." Donald shrugged. He didn't look convinced. Joseph made a decision in that moment, a decision that would change everything. He decided that this boy would not be invisible, not on his watch. The gift of attention. From that day forward, Joseph made time for Donald. Every morning before the staff arrived, Joseph would spend 15 minutes with the boy. They would sit in the break room, and Joseph would ask Donald about his life, about his mother in Atlanta, about his friends, about his dreams. Donald, starved for genuine attention, opened up. He talked about feeling like he didn't belong anywhere. His mother had a new family. His father was always working. He was caught between two worlds, fully accepted in neither. Joseph listened. Really listened. Not the kind of listening where you're thinking about what you're going to say next. The kind of listening where you're fully present with another person, honoring their pain, validating their feelings. One morning, Joseph brought something special. He had spent his evening creating a sign language chart. Not full sign language. Joseph didn't know sign language, but simple signs. Hello. Good morning. How are you? I care about you. He had learned these signs because of Carl, because he understood what it meant to communicate with someone who couldn't hear, and he wanted Donald to know that he was willing to meet him halfway, that he was willing to learn his language, even if it was just the language of genuine care. Donald's eyes filled with tears when Joseph showed him the chart. Nobody had ever done anything like that for him before. Nobody had ever tried so hard to connect with him. I have a son, Joseph told Donald one morning. His name is Carl. He's 8 years old. He can't hear and he can't speak, but he's the smartest, kindest person I know. He taught me that communication isn't about words. It's about love. It's about showing someone that they matter to you. Donald listened intently. He asked questions about Carl. Joseph told him stories. Stories about Carl's first day of school, stories about Carl's favorite foods, stories about the dreams Joseph had for his son's future. And as Joseph shared these stories, something shifted in Donald. He realized that his loneliness wasn't unique, that other people struggled too, that his father's busyness wasn't about Donald not being worthy of attention. It was about George being trapped in his own world of ambition and success. The rising tide people started noticing the connection between Joseph and Donald. The office staff whispered about it. Why was the janitor spending so much time with the boss's son? Why did Donald light up whenever Joseph arrived? Mr. Harrison noticed it too. He called Joseph into his office one afternoon. Joseph's heart sank. He thought he was going to be fired. He thought he had overstepped his boundaries. But Mr. Harrison surprised him. I don't know what you're doing with Donald, Mr. Harrison said, but whatever it is, keep doing it. I've never seen that boy smile like he does when you're around. His father has noticed too. Joseph felt a wave of relief wash over him. He wasn't in trouble. He was actually making a difference. George Whitmore had indeed noticed. He had seen his son laughing with the janitor. He had seen Donald waiting eagerly for Joseph to arrive each morning. He had seen his son come alive in a way that no expensive gift or planned activity had ever accomplished. And it made George think, really think, about what he was doing with his life, about what he was missing with his son. One morning George came into the break room while Joseph and Donald were there. He stood in the doorway watching them. Joseph was showing Donald how to fold a piece of paper into an origami crane. It was something Joseph had learned to do with Carl, a way to keep his hands busy during the long nights when he couldn't sleep. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore," Joseph said, standing up respectfully. George didn't respond immediately. He was looking at his son, really looking at him, seeing him for the first time in a long time. "What's your name?" George asked Joseph. "Joseph Marcus, sir." "How long have you been working here, Joseph?" 3 weeks, sir." George nodded slowly. "And in 3 weeks you've done more for my son than I've done all summer. That's a hard truth to swallow, Joseph. But it's the truth." Joseph didn't know what to say. He didn't want to disrespect Mr. Whitmore, but he also didn't want to lie. "You're a busy man, sir," Joseph said carefully, "but I can see that you love your son. Sometimes love just needs a little time to show itself." George looked at Joseph for a long moment. Then he looked at Donald. Then he sat down at the table with them. "Teach me," George said to Joseph. "Teach me how to do that." And Joseph taught him. He showed George how to fold the paper, how to be patient, how to be present, how to listen without planning what to say next. It was a simple moment. A man, a boy, and a janitor folding paper cranes in a break room. But it was also a moment of profound transformation. A moment when a powerful man realized that all his money and success meant nothing if he couldn't connect with his own son. The Revelation summer was coming to an end. Donald would be returning to Atlanta soon. George knew he had to make a change. He couldn't go back to the way things were. He couldn't let his son disappear into invisibility again. One afternoon, George called Joseph into his office. This time, Joseph knew something significant was about to happen. "Joseph," George began, "I want to talk to you about your future." Joseph's stomach tightened. Was he being fired? Had he done something wrong? "When Donald goes back to school," George continued, "he'll need someone to pick him up from school, someone to help him with his homework, someone to be there for him when I'm in meetings, someone who understands what it means to really care for a child." Joseph listened, confused about where this was going. "I want that person to be you," George said. "I want to hire you as Donald's personal assistant. You would work from 3 o'clock in the afternoon until 7 o'clock in the evening, 5 days a week. You would help Donald with his schoolwork. You would take him to his activities. You would be there for him. And I would pay you $50,000 a year, plus full health insurance, plus a college fund for your son." Joseph felt the room spin. $50,000. Health insurance. A college fund for Carl. It was more money than he had ever dreamed of. "Mr. Whitmore," Joseph said, his voice shaking, "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," George said simply. "Say yes, and let me do this. Let me do this for my son, and let me do this for you, because you've shown me what real love looks like. You've shown me that a man's worth isn't measured by his bank account. It's measured by his heart." Joseph said yes. Of course he said yes. The transformation. Everything changed after that. Joseph moved with Carl to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. It was a 3-bedroom house with a yard where Carl could play. It had a modern kitchen and a bathroom that actually worked properly. It had space. It had light. It had hope. Carl's medical care improved dramatically. With the health insurance George provided, Carl was able to see specialists. He received better physical therapy. His quality of life improved in ways that Joseph had only dreamed about. But the most important change wasn't material. It was emotional. Joseph was no longer exhausted all the time. He wasn't working 3 jobs anymore. He had time to spend with Carl. Real time. Quality time. They would sit in their backyard in the evenings, and Joseph would tell Carl stories about Donald, about how kindness had changed a lonely boy's life, about how one person's attention could transform someone's entire world. Carl, even though he couldn't speak, understood. He understood that his father had done something good. He understood that goodness had a way of coming back around. And Donald blossomed, with Joseph there to pick him up from school, to help him with his homework, to listen to him, to see him. Donald became a different child. He was happier, more confident, more secure in the knowledge that he was loved and valued. George watched this transformation, and it changed him too. He started leaving work earlier. He started having dinner with Donald instead of eating alone in his office. He started being a father, not just a provider. One evening, George invited Joseph and Carl to his penthouse apartment. It was the first time Carl had ever been in such a place. The boy's eyes were wide with wonder as he looked out at the city lights twinkling below. George had prepared a special dinner, nothing fancy, just good food and good company. As they ate, George told Joseph something that Joseph would never forget. "You know," George said, "I built this empire thinking that success meant having more money than anyone else, more power, more control. But I was wrong. Real success is having people in your life who love you for who you are, not what you have. You taught me that, Joseph, you and Carl." Joseph felt tears streaming down his face. He had never expected to be thanked by a billionaire. He had never expected his simple act of kindness to be recognized as something valuable. "I was just doing what I thought was right," Joseph said quietly. "Exactly," George replied. "You were doing what was right. Not because you expected anything in return. Not because you knew I was rich or powerful. You did it because you saw a lonely child. And you couldn't ignore that loneliness. That's the kind of person the world needs more of, Joseph. That's the kind of person I want to be. The unexpected gift." As the summer ended and Donald prepared to return to Atlanta, George made another announcement. He was going to change his custody arrangement with Donald's mother. He wanted Donald to live with him during the school year. He wanted to be a real father, not just a weekend visitor. Donald's mother, seeing how happy her son was, agreed. She understood that George had finally gotten his priorities straight. And George did something else. Something that would secure Joseph and Carl's future forever. He created a trust fund for Carl. A fund that would pay for Carl's education, his medical care, his living expenses, everything he would need to build a good life. It was worth $2 million. When Joseph found out, he fell to his knees and wept. Not tears of sadness, but tears of overwhelming gratitude. His son would be okay. No matter what happened to Joseph, Carl would be okay. "Why?" Joseph asked George. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because you showed me what love really means," George said. "Because you didn't see a rich man and a poor man. You saw a father and a son who needed each other. You saw past the money and the status and the power, and you saw the human being underneath. That's a gift, Joseph. That's a rare and precious gift, and I'm just trying to honor that gift by giving back." The emotional closing. 1 year later, Joseph stood in Carl's school auditorium. Carl was performing in the school's annual talent show. It was a simple performance. Carl had learned to play a few notes on a keyboard, and he was going to play them for the audience. Joseph sat in the front row, next to Donald and George. As Carl wheeled himself onto the stage, Joseph felt his heart swell with pride. Carl played his notes. They weren't perfect. They were simple and a little off-key. But they were beautiful because they came from Carl's heart. Because Carl had worked so hard to learn them. Because Carl was brave enough to get on that stage and share himself with the world. When Carl finished, the audience erupted in applause. Carl's face lit up with joy. He looked out into the audience and found his father. Joseph was standing, clapping, tears streaming down his face. After the show, as they walked to the parking lot, Donald put his arm around Carl's wheelchair. The two boys had become close friends. They understood each other in a way that transcended words and hearing and physical ability. They understood each other's hearts. "You were amazing," Donald said to Carl, even though Carl couldn't hear him. But Carl could see Donald's lips moving, and he could feel the love in his friend's words. George put his hand on Joseph's shoulder. "You know," George said, "I've made billions of dollars in my life. I've bought things I didn't need. I've chased success that didn't matter. But this right here, this is the most valuable thing I've ever had. A real family, a real connection, and I have you to thank for that." Joseph looked at his son. He looked at Donald. He looked at George. And he understood something profound. He understood that kindness isn't a transaction. It's not something you do expecting to get something back. Kindness is simply the choice to see another person's pain and do something about it. Kindness is the choice to be present, to listen, to care. And when you choose kindness, when you choose to see people instead of looking through them, when you choose to love without expecting anything in return, that's when miracles happen. That's when lives change. That's when the invisible become visible. That's when the lonely find family. The moral message. There's a lesson in this story that goes far beyond Joseph and Donald and George. It's a lesson about the power of human connection. It's a lesson about how one person's attention can change another person's entire world. We live in a world where we're all so busy, so focused on our own struggles, our own goals, our own success. We walk past people every day without really seeing them. We ignore the lonely child in the break room. We overlook the struggling single parent. We fail to notice the people around us who are crying out for connection. But what if we stopped? What if we took just 15 minutes a day to really see someone? To listen to them, to show them that they matter? What if we understood that the most valuable thing we can give another person isn't money or gifts or things? It's our time, it's our attention, it's our presence. Joseph didn't have money, he didn't have power, he didn't have status. But he had something far more valuable. He had a heart that could see pain and respond to it. He had the courage to sit down with a lonely boy and just be there for him. And that simple act of kindness changed 4 lives. It changed Donald's life. It changed George's life. It changed Carl's life. And it changed Joseph's life. But here's the thing that's really important. Joseph didn't do it for the reward. He didn't sit down with Donald thinking, maybe this will lead to a better job. He did it because he saw a child who was hurting, and he couldn't ignore that hurt. That's what real kindness is. It's not transactional. It's not about what you get back. It's about seeing another human being and choosing to love them anyway. In a world that often feels cold and disconnected, kindness is revolutionary. Empathy is radical. Presence is powerful. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Who in your life is invisible? Who is sitting alone in a break room waiting for someone to see them? Who is crying out for connection? Maybe it's a family member. Maybe it's a coworker. Maybe it's a stranger on the street. Maybe it's someone you see every day but have never really looked at. What if you decided, starting today, to be the person who sees them? What if you decided to be the person who listens? What if you decided to be the person who cares? Because that's what changes the world. Not money, not power, not success. Love, kindness, empathy, connection. One person at a time, one moment at a time, one act of kindness at a time. YouTube call to action. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of kindness and human connection, I want to ask you to do 3 things. First, like this video. Let me know that this story resonated with you. Your likes help me reach more people with stories that matter. Second, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching this from. What time of day is it where you are? What did this story mean to you? Did it remind you of someone in your life? I read every comment, and I would love to hear from you. And third, subscribe to this channel. Subscribe so you never miss another story. Stories about real people, stories about kindness, stories about the power of human connection, stories that remind us that goodness still exists in this world, stories that inspire us to be better versions of ourselves. Because the world needs more stories like this. The world needs to be reminded that one person can make a difference, that your kindness matters, that your presence matters, that you matter. So thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being the kind of person who stops to listen to a story about a janitor and a lonely boy and a billionaire who learned what really matters in life. I'll see you in the next video. Keep being kind. Keep seeing people. Keep changing the world one act of kindness at a time.